it's definitely an overwhelming, daunting thing to think about changing the entire system that the society is built on. But like, you can't do it all. And I think you just have to understand that everyone can just do their own part and just try your hardest at that part, right? And if we all do our parts, it'll all work out because we're doing it now this way. So it's easy to see that we can do it the other way.
Hello, and welcome to the Founder Shares podcast. We're so happy that you've chosen to spend some time with us. I'm your host, Trevor Schmidt. I'm an attorney at Hutchison, a law firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. We work with founders and entrepreneurs start up, operate, get funded, and exit. So, whether you're already an entrepreneur, want to be one someday, or are just fascinated by the stories of how a business goes from idea to success, or not such a success, this podcast is for you.
All right. Well, I am very excited today to be joined by Cory Sanderson of Sustaera, a Durham-based climate technology company working to address one of the biggest challenges facing our planet, removing carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere. Sustaera is developing a novel direct air capture, or DAC technology, designed to permanently remove carbon while lowering the cost and energy requirements that have limited broader adoption of carbon removal technologies. Cory, welcome to the Founder Shares.
Thank you for having me.
I'm also excited to welcome back an old friend of the podcast, my law partner, Josh Hayes. Josh?
Glad to be back.
Hey, you're starting to be a little bit of a regular here, so
that's right.
Glad to have you back here. So, Cory, before we really get into Sustaera, I want to talk a little bit about yourself. Let's start with, what did you imagine you'd be doing when you were a kid?
Yeah, I don't know, like a lot of little kids growing up, boys, thought first police officer, firefighter, something like that. And then I think it quickly shifted into, just my enjoyment of building things, building Legos, building puzzles, and trying to put a lot of things together and make something out of it, right? Make something out of nothing. So I always saw myself as being in the building, but I didn't know exactly how. I thought maybe building with my hands, building with my mind. And so I think it kind of has all come together. Yeah, that's kind of what I didn't have one set thing, let's say, but that's what kind of inspired me maybe.
Was there anything from when you were a kid that you built that you look back on and you're like, oh, I was so proud of that. I was so excited to have built that?
There's a few, I don't know about like building things, but definitely a few things from, growing up and going through school and different projects that you work on. You're like, wow, okay, like actually did a pretty cool thing there. So there's a couple biology things, a couple writing things, but nothing of what I'm doing right now. So just kind of tangential. But when I realized, like, when you enjoy what you're doing and it's like something you're passionate about, then you can do really well with it. That's, I think, the biggest thing about it. So
that's for sure. And how about entrepreneurship? Was that kind of a part of the idea of building something, or did that come later?
No. I think I've just fallen into that, honestly. Like I never really thought about being an entrepreneur. In fact, I would say, going through high school and college and even right out of college, I chose the job out of college intentionally because I knew it would be safe. I knew it would be low risk. It's what I wanted and I needed at that time. I was like, no, I can't imagine like starting up a company now if other people were like, yeah, I'm going to go change the world and all this stuff. I'm like, sounds good on you. But, I just needed that safe, stable thing to kind of help transition out of school and, give a good paycheck, and looks like it has a lot of viability. But then I think over that time period, I've been able to find like, okay, there's a lot more to me, and I've grown in confidence that entrepreneurship has been something that's opened up.
Now, was there a moment where that switch happened where you felt like, okay, I can take the leap, I can take the risk?
There was a switch when I was able to take that leap from that comfort job to out in the open, but it wasn't straight to an entrepreneur, like being the CEO right away, right? I've worked my way up to that. It was at the end of my career at Air Products and been developing different technologies and pushing them into the engineering team. And just with the pushback that I got from engineering, we're all literally in the same company, and we're like, we have this really cool thing and it fits what the market needs. Like, we've been working with the business area, so here's how the work I've done, and just got so much pushback and like anxiety. And I was just like, I'm sorry that I've done some of your job, but like I kind of had to be able to get this thing to the point where we felt like it would make sense instead of just giving you a pile of, nothing for you to figure out and spend years on. So, that was really the time I was like, okay, I'm ready to go do something else, that people value the ability to think further than just the narrow swim lane that you're given at a large Fortune 500 company.
Now, how about kind of the draw to clean tech? Was that something that was always there, or did that come later on?
Yeah, that's been there since, I'd say even at the beginning of towards beginning my education in elementary school, learning about, recycling back then, and then turning into middle school and high school with my interests in, thinking about hydrogen and a new economy that's based on that instead of fossil fuels. And then in college, I did research with hydrogen, and then later out of school, joining Air Products, we did a bunch of CO2 things, carbon dioxide. So yeah, it's been kind of throughout my entire career has just been, I don't know, it's to me, you look at the world and the way we do things, and once you learn like how it all happens, you're like, this doesn't seem sustainable. And it just, to me, I've realized that really early on, and I was like, I think we can do better as a society. So like, I want to put my engineering skills and my building kind of skills together towards kind of solving problems in that space.
Well, good for you also, not only to take that step, but also not just to be overwhelmed, to be like, well, there's nothing really we can do about it. So
some days are like that, but it's definitely an overwhelming, daunting thing to think about changing the entire system that the society is built on. But like, you can't do it all. And I think you just have to understand that everyone can just do their own part and just try your hardest at that part, right? And if we all do our parts, it'll all work out, because we're doing it now this way. So it's easy to see that we can do it the other way.
That's great. How about you, Josh? I know you're very interested in working with clean tech companies. What was it about for you, or what is it about this work that appeals to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of like Cory's saying, like there are real issues facing the environment today. Whatever you think of the causes of those issues and, humanity's role in those causes, I think we can all agree that we can be part of the solution to things like climate change. And I think that innovation and sort of the innovation economy broadly is a key part of those solutions. Whether it's finding new sources of fuel or making existing energies more efficient, making the storage and transmission of those energies more efficient, or trying to do something like Cory's doing and tackle the increased carbon in the environment head on with direct air capture, which is something that Cory can speak to much more eloquently than I can. But it's really rewarding being able to work with companies that are of the same mind, that hold those same values. I find that to be a really rewarding part of the job.
Now, is that something that you sought out from early on, like Cory mentioned, like when he was a little kid, or is that something newer for you?
I'd say it's something that's a little bit newer for me. I kind of had a broader view of what I wanted to do. There were certain things in law school I knew I didn't want to do.
Right.
And then coming into practice, I knew I wanted to work with companies, and then over time came to realize that the types of companies that I really like to work with are entrepreneurially driven. And over time, sort of, that funnel narrowing even further to folks who are sort of, mission driven, passionate about the work that they're doing, and passionate about like the ecology and the environment that we all live in.
Great. Now, Cory, you touched on this a little bit, but what were some of your experiences from kind of like your early professional career that really informed what you're doing today, or kind of prompted you to do what you're doing today?
Yeah, that's a great point. There were a couple factors, I would say, in my early career, going through as an engineer and then like designing and building and starting up the facilities, to then taking a step further in the development of developing these new technologies and seeing them through that lifetime. It was never a question of there was always lots of questions of if the technology worked, but typically the answer was almost always yes, right? Like you had to solve a lot of problems to get to that yes, but at the end of the day, there's commercial technologies that can help do a lot of this stuff. And oftentimes, the problem that I saw as sitting in the engineering and technology development side is that it would fall apart when business development couldn't make the whole project work. The economics didn't work because the source of the CO2 was very distinct and disparate from the sink of the CO2, whether that's physical sequestration, like we're talking about with direct air capture, carbon removal, or utilization into fuels, or whatever it ends up being. It's like you have a power plant making power for a community. That's not necessarily where the CO2 sink is going to be, right? And so you can't build pipelines, you can't transport it, no one wants to build things. And then it just ends up hitting all these like regulatory and financial roadblocks that you can't build around. And you can't go get capital to raise, to go, do all that kind of stuff. So that's where I saw that failing, specifically with carbon dioxide. And that's what really set me out when I joined and left Air Products and joined the startup down here, is like, we need to do something differently. I think point source capture isn't really the way to go. There's a reason why it's not working and not scaling. Let's try direct air capture. Can we take a different approach on that? Direct air capture helps you to be located where the sink is. If you want to sequester the CO2, create carbon credits, cool. You can do that right on top of the well. You can, utilize the CO2 into valuable products or whatever, and think about our more sustainable economy going forward instead of pulling all the more fossil fuels out of the ground. So that's all possible with direct air capture, when you can't just think like, let's move the power plant, like 200 miles away and go do this over here, right? Mm-hmm. So on the fossil fuel kind of burning power plant. So that's really, those things are what I think kind of learned me into this space.
Okay. Now, for those who are just kind of like joining this conversation about carbon capture and all that, can you just give us a high level? You mentioned point source capture, direct air capture, sink. Just a quick kind of what are we talking about there?
Yeah, of course. So like a source and sink is just traditional. Think about any market. There's going to be something that generates something, and then a sink is where it goes to. For point source capture, that means an existing emissions point, whether it's a high temperature, high pressure, or low pressure, it doesn't matter. There's lots of different things. Like every single internal combustion car is a point source of CO2 emissions, right? Okay. If you burn a fossil fuel, you have a point source of emissions. Direct air capture is different, where I'm going to let it be emitted by wherever in the whole world, and then I'll just put a facility down that will take it directly from the air. So we'll only pass the air, atmospheric air through the filters that we have to capture the CO2. So it's not dedicated to one specific facility.
Okay. So it's almost just reducing it at the point of release versus just taking it out after it's already out.
Correct. Yeah. And obviously there's a big concentration gradient, but that's the problem that we've had to solve. And that's what we've, very much set out to do, is like, we understand there's a concentration difference, but we still can make it economic and more investable, let's say, because it's not just the economics, it has to also be the full regulation and the whole project stack.
We've kind of been dancing around it a little bit here, but tell us what it is that Sustaera is doing. What is the problem the company is trying to solve, and how's it going about it?
Yeah, so we are trying to take CO2 out of the air. The way we've gone about it is creating an extremely low-cost way to do that. It's effectively a filter that takes CO2 out of the air, similar to the way your HVAC filter will work today, where it takes particulates out of the air. Ours is very selective for CO2. It works at a high efficiency, and it's the other differentiation that we have versus some other approaches in the direct air capture market is we have an electrical regeneration method to, once we've captured that CO2, regenerate the sorbent that's used to pick it up and give us that pure CO2 product that we can use for sequestration, for utilization. And I'll talk about those in a second. So this filter is a very low-cost way to do it, and it's also extremely low operating cost, and it's very simple to use. It literally works like an HVAC system. Our whole facility, we have a demo here of how that works. If we're going to do direct air capture of CO2, if we're doing this for the betterment of society, it is at this point in time very much a nice to have, not a need to have, right? There's no consumer-based thing that says, I need to have carbon dioxide removal in my world, right? That's not the way we're incentivized to build our systems, that our systems are incentivized to do. So we need to make it super low cost. And that's the approach that we've taken. That's very different than other folks.
Now, kind of in its market implementation, are we talking like a big factory here that's sucking it out of the air? Is it something that gets attached to something else that pulls it out of the air?
Yeah, so the way we see our system, because it's so simple and low cost, we don't need to build mega factories to go and do this at a cost economic point, at a unit cost. That's what the market is willing to pay. We can do that at a much smaller scale. So it's a modular approach is what we call it. And we can do multiple of those at different places, right? That's the way we kind of see it, is like a whole lot of these at a moderate scale, let's call it, that are operating together and kind of working in tandem.
Gotcha. Now, Josh, I wanted to ask you, how did you first start working with the company? What was your connection there?
Yeah, so we actually started working with the company at its inception. Mm-hmm. It was a spin-out of a government contracting company that had a similar focus. And so we began with your typical corporate incorporation, setting up the stock plan, divvying out the cap table and the equity to the various stakeholders. We also worked with them through a few different successive rounds of fundraising, which is also something that we like to do. And I think for us as lawyers, having that context and that history with a client is really helpful. Entrepreneurship is definitely not a straight line by any means, and it's never smooth sailing. But having that history with the founding team, I think, can go a long way towards helping to navigate those choppy waters. So started working with them, I want to say back in 2021, all the way up through today.
Now, is there anything you consider unique or kind of more challenging with kind of like a clean tech company or kind of forming and operating one of those? Or
So I think there's a couple different things that are different from some of the other companies that we like to work with, whether it's on sort of the tech or the life science side. And one of those, I think, that Cory sort of demonstrated here is that a lot of clean tech companies actually have to build something physical, right? So there's a hardware component to what they're trying to do, as opposed to, say, an AI-enabled SaaS company, which, is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but with AI tools that we have today, you can go pretty quickly from an idea to development to commercialization and then scaling and fundraising, whereas there is a lot that goes into the science and the engineering of a lot of these clean tech companies. And that creates additional time, right? Because if you fix one part of the device, but another part of the device is less efficient as a result, that's a problem that has to get fixed.
Right.
And not only do you have to have the engineering and the science down, as Cory mentioned, it has to be economically viable as well, right? It has to be something that people actually want to buy and are willing to pay for.
Right.
So I think there's some unique challenges when it comes to clean tech companies for that reason.
Now, Cory, I wanted to ask you kind of if you could talk a bit about the scope of the problem and like what impact the full implementation of what you're doing might have on that problem.
Sure, yeah. The scope is massive. We emit, millions and millions of tons of CO2 per year, 40 million plus, I think, here just in the United States. Of course, we are very clearly, I want to state, we do not think that carbon dioxide removal is like the only solution. We absolutely have to do abatement first, right? That's like just stop emitting as much as we possibly can. But the whole point of what our premise is that eventually there's going to be some fossil fuel-based things that are just so hard to abate. They emit, they require such high temperatures that we just can't have another solution to that they're going to be continued emissions into the future in the most sustainable level of economy, that we're going to need some form of carbon dioxide removal to kind of like mitigate sort of and balance out how things are going. So that's the kind of scope. What we aim to do, our plan is to do, 500,000 tons by 2040. 500 million tons, half a gigaton by 2040 is our goal collectively to help remove from the atmosphere. That already is still like a kind of small slice of the pie, but it would be a massive opportunity for us as a company. So, trying to balance both what's realistic with what's optimistic and how can we stretch that.
It's exciting. And I see here you brought in some of your technology today. So tell us what it is that you brought in.
Sure. So this is our tabletop demo unit. It's just a prototype to show to people that we can take to exhibitions, that we can bring to show and tells like this, let's say, and be able to demonstrate the simplicity of the technology. It's because our thing inside of this chamber here is a conductive structured sorbent. That's the technology name that we have for it. You bring air across it. Air's filtering through this filter here. It passes through the conductive structured sorbent and gets the CO2 picked up. Once that's picked up in about 20 minutes, we can close these valves here from this demonstration unit and put electricity in through the chamber walls directly into the conductive structured sorbent. And then that releases the electricity converts to heat directly in situ, and that releases the CO2, which we're able to get as a product. This whole process runs in under 30 minutes, and we can just let it go over and over and over again. So this is our little tabletop demo unit that we're able to show people the simplicity of it. Our competitors can't do this. That's, I think, the big point where we're trying to bring across to when we go to expo centers or conferences or whatever it ends up being, all of our other people have kind of two separate things, one for adsorption and one for desorption. It's one part and one system that does both. It's just a matter of what flow I put across it, a flow of air or a flow of electricity, a current flow. That's really the focus of this. It's not to actually do much other than really show people kind of the simplicity of it.
And when the CO2 is kind of pulled out in its full form, what happens to that? What do you do?
Yeah, so we that kind of scope ends from where our technology we offer it to our customers. So there's two things that are being evaluated. Our first beachhead market is going to be carbon sequestration. So that pure CO2 stream would be sold to the developer who's going to own that facility and sequester that CO2. They then go to the market and sell those CO2 credits, and we're just being paid for the equipment and the licensing from that. The other approach is where someone's going to utilize it. They want to turn it into CO2 and blend it with hydrogen and turn it into sustainable aviation fuel or something like that. So those are our kind of two current markets, with the focus being the carbon removal.
So I guess talk about what are some areas or like potential challenges still with the technology as it is today, or what are some of the limitations that you're facing?
Certainly a limitation right now is being able to convince people that this is different enough. There's 125 some DAC companies that have been funded since 2020.
You said DAC? Oh,
direct air capture
yep.
companies. It's an insane amount that have been funded in this, climate tech, clean tech 2.0 kind of funding round. And it's not sustainable. I mean, there's no industry in the whole world that has 125 competitors, right? So you just you can understand that consolidation is bound to happen, but also, it's being able to kind of rise above the noise is one of the challenges, I would say, from a marketing and just a visibility standpoint. The other is, there's still development that we have to do here, and trying to balance like what investors are looking to see, the risk appetite that they're trying to do, versus less status that we still have to develop, and show to the market. To Josh's point earlier, we have to build something to take it out of the lab and go bigger scale. But to build something, I need money. But for someone to give me money, they want to see it working. So it's just a very classic chicken and the egg. Mm-hmm. A valley of death, kind of TRL 6 is what they say, is where we're at now. So that's, I think, the challenge that our company faces right now.
Now, talk to me. I don't know a whole lot about this technology or this space, but my understanding is there's some concerns around like inefficiency with energy, and how, tell me a little bit about how this technology addresses that, or is it kind of something that you're still working towards?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what our technology aims to get at from the get-go, and we've designed out effectively instead of having those things baked in that our competitors are. So most of our other competitors are doing a thermal-based regeneration. So they use something like steam or waste heat. They'll actually pass like a hot stream of gas across their structured sorbent or packed bed or whatever it ends up being to be able to release the CO2. But when you do that, you're effectively using what's called in thermodynamics a Carnot heat cycle, and it's like 30 to 40% heat efficiency at best. What we've done at Sustaera is designed in a resistive heating method that is 90% heating efficient. That's completely different than anybody else in the marketplace, right? Like 3 to 4x better than anybody else. And that is what lowers our energy needs significantly, which then allows us to hit to the unit cost that we need.
That's helpful.
What's the amount of CO2 that you can actually pull and sort of take from this tabletop unit? Like what sort of volume are we talking about here?
Yeah, this one piece right here can do about 1/4 of a ton per year of CO2.
Okay. And I guess developmentally, would the next stage in development be sort of a larger scale of this prototype? And what kind of volume of CO2 would you be looking to remove from the environment with that next step in the development?
Yeah, thanks. The next step for us is an on-site validation unit that's going to be sent to different project developer sites. That scale is going to be 10 tons per year. And so one of the beauties of this technology, because it's just the one part that does adsorption and desorption, once we understand it working at this size, it's a linear scaling. And so we can go and say, it's a very low risk. I just have to make bigger things, put it in a bigger size unit, and go deploy that to the site, right? And so it gives us more confidence that we can stand behind what those KPIs or the key performance indicators, how it's going to behave, and then go demonstrate that, get it signed off by the developer, and then move on to the next scale.
And these can kind of go anywhere, right? Because you're not tied to like a smokestack.
That's right.
Right. You could just have anybody who's interested in sort of a carbon reduction program or element associated with like their real estate or their commercial property, like they could put one of these on their site and be pulling carbon right out of the atmosphere.
Yeah, ideally, we'd be contracting with those folks to be buying the carbon removal credits to offset their emissions, but it would be located with these major developers that are going to be located right next to the sequestration wells. So developing projects in Canada, developing projects in Western Texas where there's known infrastructure for that sort of thing.
Now, I'm curious, as you're pulling something out, I mean, is there sufficient? I mean, if you start to pull enough carbon out, is there like a sufficient market to sell the credits or to be able to use it in kind of their additional, you talked about combining it with something else to create another product. Is there a limit to that, I guess I should say? Yeah,
good question. So market has to be there first before you have anything else, right? The best technology can just completely die if there's no market. Carbon dioxide removal market has been growing with new buyers, 1 million tons per year over the last 3 years. Recently, Frontier brought on Anthropic to be able to announce the advanced market commitments of almost $1 billion of additional credit removals that are going to be contracted. And just last week, actually, the European Union introduced mandatory removals via DAC and Bikers, which is a competitive technology, starting in 2031 into their emission trading scheme. So yes, the market is absolutely there. There's new buyers coming in, there's large buyers, and now it's moving, I think in the 2030s as the market was hoping to kind of see moving it into compliance from voluntary as well.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. Is most of the kind of the creation of the market from kind of government policies and regulations, or do you see a significant number of companies saying, raising your hands, this is something we want to do because it's important to us?
As of right now, it's all voluntary, actually, which is a great thing that we can like get it started that way, show that it works, kind of work out all the kinks. But eventually, to be large scale and fully adopted, I think that we're going to have, whether it's government, incentives or carrot stick is kind of to be determined, I think, and it'll depend on where you are kind of globally. But I think eventually that's where the market's heads.
Well, I mean, and it touches on it a little bit, but what are some of when you don't have a market necessarily where people have to have this, or they might not even have a financial incentive to have this, how do you create a business kind of around it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, that has been the, I don't know, that's the existential question that I ask myself weekly on how do we really bring what we think is truly differentiated technology into a market that's still nascent and growing, and at the same time, is there a way, let's say, that you can arrive at the market at the right time so that it's like, okay, if there were some questions on the market and people aren't sure, it's like this arrives at the right time that you can rebuild confidence in the continuing growth of that market. It's definitely a challenging thing. One pathway that we've thought about is because of our unique ability to use just all electricity and use renewable electricity, we can envision ourselves tied to renewable power, solar or wind, something like that, behind the meter even, not even on the grid. And we're using that excess or curtailed power normally that's being thrown away and not utilized. We can use that for carbon dioxide removal. That's a unique thing that our system can do. So we're trying to come up with different ways and schemes of marketing it, of selling it to people that's like, hey, this does something else that other people can't do. And there's value in that for you, right? So yeah, it's definitely a unique challenge that our company faces.
Well, and as I think about it from an investor side of things as well, kind of like what does that investor pitch look like? Because it's, in some respects, it's not this same type of an investor model maybe.
That's right.
Or maybe it is, I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely a very niche area of venture capital. There are some venture capital that's out there looking for this. We are also targeting, angels and family offices and people, philanthropics, people that are kind of more understanding of the broader scheme. They understand there might be some longer timelines to pay out, but there is still a viable business here, and there is still a market that will be had, and the best technology will win or be a part of that winning solution there. So the pitch is definitely a little bit more, and it's a bit more tailored towards that audience to make sure that we're kind of hitting on, hey, this is a viable business. It's because of the differentiated technology. Oh, and no, the market is there, but yeah, we understand it's going to take a little bit of time to grow. So, of course, you're going to miss a lot of that, very quick return, sort of all high return venture capital firms quickly just wiped off the books as available funding. But, there's thankfully still people out there that are kind of understanding.
And Josh, from your side of things, how does that change kind of from the legal representation, as you're working with different types of investors? Does it change what they're asking for, what they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of the same things that Cory just mentioned as far as the kind of typical profile of a company that a traditional VC may be looking to invest in. Is that 5 to 7 years, which aligns with the life of their fund, right? So limited partners invest in a fund. The VC promises that they'll have some sort of return within the life of the fund, which is anywhere, could be 5, 10, or 5, 7 years, could be longer than that. And I think it's sometimes difficult for clean technology companies to fit within that box because for all the things that we've been talking about, right? Like we're building something new, we're building a new market. We have a regulatory environment that is uncertain in a lot of ways. The regulatory landscape has not really caught up to a lot of these clean technologies, I would say, including DAC. And that's a real challenge. And so I think what you find is investors that really have two things. So one, they tend to have an interest in clean technologies and climate technologies for something that's beyond the bottom line, usually related to ecological sustainability and stewardship. And two, they tend to be a little bit more patient capital, right? So they're willing to work with the companies to get them to where they need to be, which is a working, scalable, and economically viable technology.
No, I think that's helpful. And I guess Cory maybe touch on that a little bit. He talked about how the regulatory market's uncertain. Kind of what type of regulations do you have to deal with kind of in introducing this type of technology? And, how does that play into what you're building?
The traditional, like permitting and all that kind of stuff that's in place for building any sort of industrial facility. Regulatory, there is a tax credit available for building these facilities here in the United States. There's also, and that's on the amount of CO2 you'll actually take out. And then there's another one that's in Canada that's based on if you build it, there's a certain amount of capital. It's like an ITC kind of program, investment tax credit. So there's a few different things here in North America that are incentivizing that rollout and deployment.
Tell me a little bit of kind of the difference in the U.S. market versus internationally. You talked about some different locations. Are there other countries that are doing a better job of implementing this type of technology?
It's really mixed. So there's no one that's doing it great. There's European and Japan that are taking the very forward thinking on the market itself, meaning the actual removals and like buying the credits and all that kind of stuff, and mandating that companies are doing that by certain timeframes. But then you have the U.S. and Canada that I think are the really leaders in like developing the new technologies, and then they have the kind of tax credits to be able to do it, but there's no policy incentives. There's no real regulatory framework that's like, oh, well, you have to do it, so let's go build it. So it's kind of like you got the tech and maybe some financial incentives here, and then you got the regulatory stuff over in other places. So it's really a mixed bag.
Yeah. So, I mean, is this a solution you see kind of being rolled out worldwide? I mean, is this a goal for the company or? Yeah,
eventually, for sure. Our initial market is going to be here in North America because of those incentives that I've mentioned. And then eventually, especially because a lot of those compliance ones are going to be allowed to be traded. Again, because we're doing direct air capture, we can kind of do it anywhere in the world, right? So you're going to go sort of target the geographic locations that are most favorable for the technology from a performance standpoint. That'll lower the cost, and then that'll also help, the most revenue for the project that's being built, and that would also kind of be the most friendly regulatory framework. So, of course, all those filters would be applied and eventually scaled down to where those things could go. But globally is definitely an option. It's just a question of really where does that end up being implemented is how it all plays out.
Right. Now, I'm a little curious too. It seems like we're talking about kind of companies with incentives to install this. Is there any sort of a market for almost personal or consumer use? I mean, I think of houses that put up solar panels and kind of try to adjust their carbon footprint like that. Is there something like that as an option for, you're going to see these rolled out in a residence somewhere?
Yeah, right now that's not our plan. It's always the question of what do you do with the CO2 that you capture. So right now our two markets that we're focusing on definitely require like an industrial and other business to do that, to build that project with. Eventually, if we can develop some sort of consumer-based thing to do it, this is a simple and low-cost thing. I don't think that the price point would be off, but it's really just how do I find something that I can do on a very small scale to with that CO2.
Now, I know we talked about it a little bit before we started the podcast today, but, you talked about raising funds and, it's a tough fundraising environment. For both of you, kind of like how do you navigate that environment, especially when it can change month to month, year to year, and how do you keep kind of moving forward?
Yeah, great question. It's my focus right now, and it's just being able to stay driven by the opportunities that we have available to us, and staying focused on those, trying to just network and meet as many people as we possibly can, and take every warm introduction or anyone that's willing to have a conversation and just explore that opportunity with them and take it as far as it can possibly go, and then take that on to the next thing. So yeah, it's just a matter of networking and getting out to know people and putting the word out there like, hey, we think we have something different here. We'd love to talk to you if you're interested. That's what I've seen and tried, and it seems to be working so far. But yeah, it's definitely a challenging thing.
Well, what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, Cory has the hard job here, right? I mean, fundraising is the hardest thing that an entrepreneur is ever going to have to do. And, fundraising within a particular niche area is kind of compounds the challenge. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Cory's doing really well is to navigate this broader ecosystem. And I think that's one of the strengths that we have here in the Research Triangle as well, right? Because while from a purely sort of science, research, and development standpoint, I think we can go toe-to-toe with, the big players in the U.S., the Bostons, the Silicon Valley, but, we're getting a small fraction here in North Carolina of all venture dollars. Mm-hmm. And that makes things really difficult when the fuel for your entrepreneurial endeavor is your cash, right? Cash is king in managing that burn. But one of the things I do think we have as a strength that offsets, I think, that limit to access to capital, not perfectly, right? Because I think you do need to have the cash. But it's the warmness and friendliness of the people in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. It's that if there is somebody who maybe isn't in a position to write a check, their willingness to make an introduction to someone who they think may be able to help you in some way. So sort of that friendliness factor or that camaraderie that comes, I think, from the Research Triangle is a real strength of ours. And I think that Cory's done a good job in sort of mapping and navigating that ecosystem.
Yeah, I'd build on that. Thank you for the compliment. I would definitely agree that here in the Triangle, it's if you put yourself out there and you show you're willing to listen to people, then they're willing to tell you and give you some feedback, and it can be honest, and sometimes it's brutal and maybe not what you exactly want to hear, but you need to hear it, right, at certain times. And then they're very willing to make introductions and say, look, well, I don't know if I'm the right person, but, go talk to so-and-so. And yeah, you just start that whole conversation and then kind of see where it leads. I think it's been fantastic to be able to meet people and yeah, I definitely would say to any entrepreneur out there that's thinking about it is just don't pretend like you know everything. Just be guard down. Most of the time, obviously, be guarded with don't share your secrets and all that stuff, but be open and say I don't exactly know how to do this. I've never done it before. That's okay. You right. Don't need to pretend no one has. In fact, I'd say most people don't want to hear you say that. Then they'll probably put their guard up and not be willing to give you much feedback. So I found that being super a good way that I've been able to kind of open a lot of doors.
So as we've talked about, I guess, traditional capital in some respects. Is there other alternate forms of capital that are available for clean tech companies that you can explore or have explored, the government funding or institution? How does that play out?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely, I would say, for a couple of years ago, there was a lot more government funding. A lot of that's been peeled back recently. There is still some available out there in very specific targeted areas. There's definitely philanthropy out there for different, specific niche things. It's like, oh, we want to do blue marine carbon. We want to help build up the coastline here in North Carolina, and it also has a restorative thing, and we get to remove carbon at the same time. Like I've seen things like that. So yeah, there's lots of things out there, and you just got to go look and ask and try to figure it out.
Well, you mentioned the fact that the funding positions changed so much in the recent years. How do you navigate kind of those swings, I guess? Because it seems like 4 years ago, it may have been a completely different environment, and 2 years from now, it could be something completely different. So
yeah. I think the biggest thing is just stay level-headed. Don't ride the highs too high and don't ride the lows too low. Like everything comes and goes. You have to remind yourself that. So don't, ramp your production up too much. Don't ramp your team up too much. Don't overspend in the high times because likely a downturn is coming and you have to be ready for that. So you have to be able to extend your runway and be there when your technology is ready and the market's ready, right? And those things can match up. So that's my advice.
That's great. I really appreciate that. And I did want to ask you to kind of, how do you deal with skeptics, I guess? Because I imagine in your field, there's a number of them. Kind of some of them are going to be, does this technology work? How is it really different than somebody else's? Some of them may be even broader. Do we really need to pull carbon out? How do you navigate all those different kind of people poking at you, I guess?
You just try to meet people where they are. I've just found, if I say something and if I'm saying it to someone's face, I just watch their expressions and maybe I hear what they first have to say and they're like, okay, I gotta go to a different mode here, right? They're not the person that I thought I was pitching to, and I hear them and try to meet them wherever they are, and just try to understand, even if it's like they're really far away and they definitely don't believe in it. It's like, even if I can just have a conversation with this person and have them just try to understand my perspective, and I'll listen to them and have them see that I'm hearing their perspective, even if it moves them just a little bit away from their spot. I think that's what I aim to do anytime I have a skeptic.
Yeah, that's great. I'm interested from both of you, actually. What makes you hopeful for the future in this space that, that we can make a dent in it? Because we talked about at the very beginning, it's such a big problem. What makes you hopeful?
What makes me hopeful? It's a slow grinding process, but I still see people out there doing this, right? I still see the market growing. I still see technology developers out there pushing things forward. I still see, I would say in the conversations that I have with people and just sort of the openness and willingness of the public is sort of just moving us there. It's really slow. It's quite subtle, but I'm still hopeful that I think we're kind of moving in that right direction.
How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I'm seeing, the quality of entrepreneurs really, really improving as the space matures. I also think it's really heartening to see people, whether they're undergraduate students, graduate students, who are excited to learn more about and, let's say, develop and devote a PhD to tackling these types of problems. I find that sort of forward thinking to be really, really inspiring. Like Cory said, it is a grind. It's not at a point now where there's sort of universal acceptance or acknowledgement that this is the way to go. But I think the types of approach that Cory's taking, that sort of yes and, right? Like, it's not an either or between sort of the traditional way of thinking about energy solutions. We have a lot of different tools in the toolbox, and kind of pressing on as many of those different opportunities as we can, and seeing how far we can take them to get the greatest impact. Mm-hmm. So I find that to be really, makes me really hopeful for the future.
Now, do you have a support group, I guess, of like other kind of founders in the space who are kind of also working towards the clean tech goal? And is there kind of strong encouragement amongst that group?
Yeah. Actually, we do have a newly founded Carolina Climate Club. I don't know what the right term of it would be, where it's other founders and interested parties, and we get together, kind of monthly, quarterly, something like that, just to be able to share stories and focus on different things. We had a dinner last week. It was great. yeah, it's been good to sort of just like coalesce around that part and try to figure out like what this is, what does it mean for us, and sort of try to build something, in addition to the whole company thing.
Well, kind of related to that question, I wanted to ask you, what do you say success looks like for Sustaera, and maybe kind of on different timelines? Like, what does success look like in the next year? What does it look like 10 years from now?
Yeah, in the next year for us, it's demonstration of our technology externally validated by a third party. Build that validation unit, get it out, deployed in the field, and get somebody else to put their hands and eyes on it and be like, yeah, it's doing what they said it would. That's success for us. That is a massive unlock that brings validation that you can't get just by telling everybody else yourself. And then, 10 years from now, really, hopefully, we're the leading supplier of this equipment and licensing out to anyone that's interested in doing carbon dioxide removal, carbon dioxide sequestration, anything that needs that sort of that technology solution.
And for the broader kind of, I would say, carbon removal industry, is there like a dream or a goal that you see for the industry that you would hope to see within the next 5 years?
I don't have anything in particular. I just think that hopefully we can continue to get validation and like market recognition that this is a viable thing to do, and people are out there and actually trying to deliver on what their promises are.
Love it. So we are the Founder Shares podcast, and so I'd like to ask all of my guests, if you had one piece of advice that you wanted to share with somebody who's thinking about starting a company or kind of right in the middle of it, what's that advice for you?
My advice would be just really spend the time to think about what it is, what problem you're solving, what market are you solving it for, and make sure you're passionate about those things. It's such a slog to do this every single day. You have to truly be passionate for it, and you just don't want to do it if you're not really that into it. I mean, that's my advice, is just spend the time, be honest with yourself,
right,
and just say, is this really what I love? Is this the market that I love? Is this the technology, the right approach that I'm going for? And if not, maybe you can pivot or tweak some of those things. Don't give up altogether, but just really spend that time and just be truthful to yourself.
I was gonna say, I like that kind of side comment. Be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
It's not what you think you want, but is it really what you're into?
Right.
Now, Josh, you've done this before, but are you coming back with some new advice for somebody to start a company?
Well, I already gave my kind of primary
gem
in the last
level,
episode,
that's right.
but I do want to build on what Cory said, right? Like, I think one thing to really keep as your North Star is to make sure you have a real business. And by that, I mean you have science that's been validated on the one hand that works, and on the other hand, you have a customer base that is interested and willing to buy your product. And then once you have that, then I think it's important to invest in the types of things that we do, which is making sure that your corporate documentation is all done correctly. Make sure that the intellectual property that you have is owned by the company and not by the individual founders. Make sure that everybody's clear on exactly what it is they own, and that you're fulfilling your obligations to both internal and external stakeholders, and documenting all that appropriately. But I think the key is to make sure that you have the science and the technology that works and the customers that want to buy it. And then once you have that, it's important to make sure all of the other ducks are in a row.
I love it. We're going to start with passion, then we're going to go to ducks in the row, and then we're going to build a business. Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time out today. Cory, if somebody's interested in learning more about the company or wants to connect with you about investing, how do they reach out to you?
Best way is to reach out to me over email. It's ces@sustaera.com. Check out the website also, sustaera.com. Love to talk to anyone that's interested.
Fantastic. Look forward to seeing where the company goes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founder Shares podcast. If you're a founder or business owner and need legal advice, be sure to check out our team at hutchlaw.com. That's hutchlaw.com. We have the capacity to help you out with just about any legal need your company may be facing. We're passionate about the innovation economy and ready to help you on your entrepreneurial journey. I'm Trevor Schmidt, and thanks for listening to the Founder Shares podcast.